Got handed a trespassing notice, on the land my dad built with his bare hands. Name's Franklin Ward, 68, retired surveyor. The morning frost clung to my windshield, same as the ink on that violation letter, cold and unwanted. Still had Dad's old blueprint tube tucked in my truck bed. Ever had someone try to erase your entire past with a clipboard? A weathered envelope pinned to Franklin Ward's wooden gate reads, "Violation notice, unauthorized signage." Franklin hasn't received a letter on that post since his father passed. It was the same gatepost where, nearly 5 decades ago, a canvas banner had fluttered in the wind, "Welcome home, Gerald," painted by a neighbor's teenage son in sloppy red brushstrokes. That banner had greeted Franklin's father after he returned from the county office with final permits in hand, smiling like he'd just carved the road himself through sheer grit. Now, in place of joy, the gate bore an official threat, the HOA's seal stamped in stiff ink. Franklin tugged the envelope loose, squinting through his bifocals at the blocky type. Unauthorized signage, it repeated, citing bylaws and fines. His property line hadn't moved an inch since '74, and the mailbox had never needed HOA permission until now. The morning air was crisp, smelling faintly of pine and far-off chimney smoke. Gravel crunched beneath his boots as he walked the path toward his truck, a wide-hooded Ford F-100 in forest green, faded at the fenders and clinging stubbornly to the 1970s. He patted the dash as he climbed in, the gesture half habit, half conversation. Carla's diner sat just past the bend where the Baptist church used to be. A fresh October wind flipped the flags on the porch railings, and the chimes above the door jingled as Franklin stepped inside. Carla glanced up from behind the counter, where she poured coffee like it was a sacred ritual. "Well, if it isn't Mr. Ward," she said, sliding a mug his way. "Still talking your eggs with too much salt?" "Just the way my arteries like them," he replied, easing into his usual booth. He unfolded the letter on the formica table, its edges already soft from the morning's damp. Carla didn't need to read it, she recognized that bureaucratic tone from 3 booths away. "Let me guess. Loretta's reaching again?" she asked. Franklin nodded. "She thinks the gatepost violates some sign ordinance. Says it's unsightly." "She said my cafe chairs violate sidewalk visibility," Carla snorted. "Town's got 6 sidewalks." A pair of old men playing checkers near the window chuckled. Franklin sipped his coffee, black and hot, the kind that lingered on your tongue and throat. "She's quick, that one," Carla continued. "Moves like she's on a schedule. Word is, she wants to modernize the place." "Modernize what?" "This town's been running on manners and duct tape since I was born." "She had the old sycamore tree on Ridgeview cut down," Carla said. "Claimed it blocked a future bike lane." Franklin stared out the window, watching a young father walk his son along the shoulder of the road, the same road Gerald Ward had laid down one rocky foot at a time. "Who gives her that authority?" he muttered. "Technically, the HOA," Carla shrugged. "But no one voted. She slid in last spring when Carl Patterson passed. No election, just acting president. You blink around here and someone's declared themselves mayor." At that, Franklin pushed the letter aside. He felt the shift, not just in property lines or bylaws, but in tone. It was like someone had changed the locks on a home you'd never left. Outside, Miner the mail carrier stepped in, jingling as usual from the keys and badge lanyard he wore year-round. He spotted Franklin and came over sheepishly. "Hey, Frank. Sorry 'bout the letter," he said. "Just doing my route." "No harm," Franklin said. "You deliver it, you don't write it." "Loretta's got me dropping these all over town," Miner said. "Says, beautification project. Folks aren't happy." "I'll bet." Miner scratched the back of his neck. "She even marked Jenkins' chicken coop. Said it visually disrupted the neighborhood harmony. Jenkins has had chickens longer than she's had a zip code." Franklin finished his coffee and left $2 bills tucked neatly under the saucer. Carla winked as she cleared his plate, flipping the "tips appreciated" jar on the counter to face him directly. Driving back up his gravel drive, Franklin slowed as he passed the creek where his father used to skim stones. The old barn, sagging slightly at the roof, still held a few of Gerald's hand tools. He parked the truck beneath the pecan tree, its leaves turning brittle yellow, and made his way into the house. In the back closet, behind a row of winter coats and a faded denim jacket, sat a wooden box. He hadn't opened it in years, not since his wife passed. The brass latch clicked open, and a faint scent of cedar and dust greeted him. Inside, beneath yellowing newspaper clippings and a leather-bound ledger, lay a rolled-up parchment tied with a burgundy ribbon. He slid it out carefully, unrolling the stiff edges to reveal his father's surveyor's map, inked by hand, dotted with coordinates, and bearing the seal of New Canaan's Planning Commission, 1974. A deed. And a statement of intent. This road, surveyed and built by Gerald Ward, is deeded to the property at 119 Magnolia Ridge. Franklin sat for a long while, fingers brushing the corners of the map, tracing the line of the road like a boundary between memory and trespass. He murmured, "They're picking the wrong fight," and folded the map into his coat pocket. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back. This is private HOA property," Kyle says, placing a cone where Franklin's survey stick was. The sun hadn't yet burned off the morning fog that clung low to the ground, curling between tree roots and fence lines like some cautious animal. Franklin stood just beyond the eastern corner of his property, steel-tipped measuring tape in one hand, an old wooden stake in the other. Dew slicked his boots, and breath curled from his nostrils like steam from a kettle. He squinted toward the property marker, same spot it had always been, same coordinates his father had shown him back in '82. Kyle's SUV, a new, glinting black Lexus with tires that had never seen gravel, was idling too close to the ditch. The man himself stepped out in designer boots, too clean for the job at hand, holding a cone like it was a police badge. Franklin didn't move. "You're placing that cone on private land, son," he said flatly. Kyle smiled the way someone might smile at a dog who didn't know it had wandered into the wrong yard. "Exactly. HOA property. That line was redrawn last spring." "Funny," Franklin replied, "this stake's been in the same place since your mama was still learning cursive." "I'm just following orders, Mr. Ward. Loretta says we're cleaning up visual pollution and boundary encroachments." "Boundary encroachment?" Franklin raised a brow. "This road's on the original deed map. My father poured the gravel with his own two hands." Kyle leaned in with theatrical patience. "And the HOA repaved it. Which makes it theirs now." Franklin's grip on the measuring tape tightened. "Ownership doesn't transfer with asphalt." Kyle pulled out his phone. "Well, we can let the county sort that out. You're technically on shared grounds now. I'll call the deputy. Be my guest." 15 minutes later, a familiar beige patrol car rolled in slowly, gravel crunching under well-worn tires. Deputy Hall stepped out, face unreadable but not unfriendly. He tipped his hat toward Franklin, then glanced at Kyle. "What's going on this morning?" "This gentleman is interfering with HOA survey work," Kyle said, voice sharp with self-importance. "He's trespassing." Deputy Hall walked a slow circle, eyeing the cone, the tape, and the aging stake now resting in the ground. "Franklin, you laying out lines?" "Verifying them," Franklin replied. "Same ones that we've been here since 1974. Kyle rolled his eyes. "I've already explained, we redrew the shared use zone. The HOA's boundaries have been updated." Deputy Hall sighed. "You got that paperwork, son?" "I've got the new digital maps on my phone." Franklin held up his copy of the original deed, paper crisp from careful storage. "And I've got the county seal on parchment." While the two men exchanged documents, Shirley peered over her porch rail just across the road, wrapped in a fleece robe covered in tiny pumpkins. She held a steaming mug close to her chest and made no move to interrupt. Her porch swing creaked gently as it swayed, empty beside her. Deputy Hall rubbed the bridge of his nose. "All right. Nobody's getting arrested today. Mr. Ward, I'm not here to mediate a property dispute, but I'd suggest letting this get sorted through records, preferably at the courthouse, not on the gravel." Franklin didn't budge. "You know as well as I do, Randy, that land doesn't move. Lines do. On paper. But that road? That's bones and sweat. I do know that, Deputy Hall said quietly. But I also know this isn't going to stop here. They'll be back with more than cones next time. Kyle crossed his arms, clearly annoyed by the lack of a more dramatic outcome. He plucked up the cone and stormed back to his SUV without another word, tires spinning dirt as he peeled away. Shirley's porch swing stopped. She descended her steps slowly, each movement deliberate, like she was pacing herself more for principle than frailty. Her slippers made soft shuffling noises across the road as she approached. Franklin stood still, watching the road dust settle. You're not crazy, Franklin. I remember when your dad paved that road. In the town archive basement, Franklin finds a brittle blueprint labeled Ward Road, dedicated 1974. The air down there was 10 degrees cooler and smelled like forgotten time, old paper, mildew, and just a trace of machine oil. Franklin descended the last creaky step, blinking under the flickering buzz of fluorescent lights. Rows of metal drawers lined the walls like coffins of memory, their small brass labels dulled by years of fingertips. Behind the long wooden desk sat Ellen Parker, leaning over a clipboard as if solving a riddle from the 1980s. Her glasses rested low on her nose, and her hair was pinned back with 2 yellow pencils. She looked up, squinting, then smiled when she recognized Franklin. Well, look who's chasing ghosts, she teased, setting her pen down. I'm hoping to find something the living might have misplaced, Franklin said, offering a faint smile. Ellen waved him around the desk. What are we looking for? Maps. Road dedications, specifically. From the mid-70s. Should be under Ward Road, or possibly listed as a private build. Her brows lifted slightly, then she turned toward a wide cabinet with frayed folder tabs. You know, most of these haven't been touched since Reagan's first term. Just how I like M, Franklin muttered. She pulled open drawer after drawer, fingers gliding across labels: Subdivision Survey, 1982, Drainage Revision, 1979, County Lot Mergers, 1973-75. Then she paused. Well now, she eased a brittle folder onto the table. Inside, tucked between aging correspondence and stamped memos, was a blueprint with hand-inked lines and fading notations. Across the top, in firm block letters, read, Ward Road, dedicated 1974. Franklin's breath caught. He reached out, brushing dust from the corner. I thought this was lost. Ellen leaned in, adjusting her glasses. It was never scanned. But it's here. Filed under Private Contributions to County Infrastructure. Strange how nobody ever asked for it. He stared at the paper's inked lines, his father's unmistakable drafting strokes. Every angle was crisp, every measurement scrawled in that slightly slanted script only Franklin could read. The drawing bore his father's signature at the bottom, Gerald Ward, 1974. I watched him sketch this at our kitchen table, Franklin murmured. He drew the northern boundary line freehand, then measured it a dozen times before handing it in. Ellen stepped back to give him space. I'll make you 3 copies. On archival paper. Bless you, Ellen. As the old copier hummed behind her, Franklin leaned over the table, elbows resting beside a rotary phone bolted to the wall. The archive room hadn't changed in decades, and that comforted him more than he expected. Later that afternoon, back at the house, he cleared a space on the wall beside his father's faded photograph, Gerald Ward standing tall in front of the first grader, a roll of maps in one arm and a steel-toed boot atop a gravel mound. Franklin framed the copy of the blueprint and hung it beside the photo, lining up the horizon lines like his father would have. A knock came at the screen door. Shirley stepped in with a foil-covered plate in hand, her smile framed by her gray scarf and gentle laugh lines. Carla insisted I bring this by. Pumpkin pie, double cinnamon. Said it helps when you're digging into the past. Franklin chuckled. Tell her I owe her a coffee. He motioned toward the newly hung map. Shirley approached it slowly, setting the pie on the table. My, she whispered. He really did build it. I told Kyle that. He wouldn't hear it. Well, Kyle, here's what Loretta says. And Loretta, she trailed off, then looked him in the eye. Franklin, I should have said this sooner. I used to be the treasurer for the HOA. Before she took over. Franklin turned to face her. I didn't know that. She pushed me out 3 years ago, claimed she was streamlining operations. But before that, I saw her husband take several boxes from the records room. Just before they'd modernized the archive system. Franklin's face tightened. They didn't want old paperwork getting in the way of their vision, Shirley said, voice low. Franklin stared at the map again, tracing his father's signature with one calloused finger. He whispered, then this goes deeper than Loretta. You're not on the agenda, Mr. Ward, Loretta says as Franklin rises, holding a rolled-up map in trembling hands. The air in the community center smelled like burnt coffee and lemon-scented floor cleaner. Rows of beige folding chairs creaked under the weight of tired neighbors, while a flickering fluorescent bulb above buzzed like a lazy wasp. On the snack table near the back wall, a stack of napkins sagged beside half-stale donuts and a metal urn labeled decaf only. Franklin sat near the exit, his 1970s windbreaker zipped halfway despite the warmth of the room. On his lap rested the cylindrical leather case he hadn't touched since his surveying days. He glanced at Shirley across the aisle. She gave a quick nod, her eyes signaling the moment was near. Loretta Shaw stood at the front, perfectly composed behind a plastic podium. Her blouse was neatly pressed, her hair pulled into an uncompromising bun, and a pin-reading HOA executive chair gleamed beneath the harsh lights. Beside her, Kyle leaned against the wall, arms folded, eyes scanning the room with impatient detachment. Let's begin, Loretta said crisply, tapping her clipboard. We'll first review landscaping updates and trash collection compliance. Franklin listened, every syllable poking like a pine needle. When she moved to infrastructure, the room subtly shifted. A few neighbors straightened their posture. Loretta cleared her throat. As part of our modernization goals, the HOA board proposes a road redevelopment plan. This includes Ward Road and the southern lots. We're recommending new maintenance fees for all adjacent properties, effective January. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Hank, who lived near the pond, muttered something under his breath. Ms. Bishop adjusted her hearing aid. Franklin stood slowly, cane in one hand, the map case in the other. His joints protested, but his voice, when he spoke, cut through the air like winter wind. Before we vote on anything, he said, there's a matter of record you all ought to see. Loretta didn't blink. You're not on the agenda, Mr. Ward. He kept moving forward, step by deliberate step, and unscrewed the top of the case. From inside, he pulled the blueprint, creased at the edges, but still proud in its purpose. Gasps flickered as the bold title came into view, Ward Road, dedicated 1974. He unrolled it atop the folding table up front. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice steadied with each word. This road, he said, tapping a blue ink line, was designed, built, and maintained by my father, Gerald Ward. These deed lines predate your HOA, and here, he pointed to a signature block, is the county stamp. Dated October 1974. Filed under private contributions. Kyle gave a sharp laugh. And you just happened to find this now? Some neighbors turned to him with frowns. Janice squinted at the map. Wait. Gerald Ward? I remember him laying gravel with his truck. My dad helped him. Franklin nodded. He didn't just build a road. He opened this community. Loretta's smile remained tight. Regardless of family folklore, the current HOA bylaws recognize only official records in our governance archive. If this map isn't part of it. It was, Shirley said loudly. Until certain files went missing. Several heads turned. Loretta's smile thinned. Ms. Shaw, Franklin continued, you're trying to impose fees and control over land that was never yours to govern. This road was never transferred to HOA ownership. Never ceded, never absorbed. He turned toward the crowd. If they can take this road, what's next? Your sheds. Your fences. Your porches that aren't modern enough. A silence followed. Even the coffee urn had stopped gurgling. Then Hank nodded slowly. I remember that road going in. Before there were even house numbers. Ms. Bishop leaned toward her neighbor. He's right. Loretta's pushing too far. Franklin let the moment settle, then softly concluded, this road existed before your HOA bylaws, and it belongs to my family. Loretta took a slow breath, flipping the clipboard page. In light of tonight's unexpected commentary, she said, the board is announcing a motion. Beginning next week, Ward Road will be fenced off, temporarily, for liability reasons, pending further review. No Thanksgiving party. Shirley's voice cuts through the church basement, then we'll host it ourselves. The old church basement hummed with quiet rebellion. The overhead lights flickered faintly above rows of mismatched chairs and fold-out tables covered with paper doilies and crockpots. Trays of steaming mac and cheese and sweet rolls shared space with thermoses of cider and decaf. On the far wall, the community bulletin board overflowed, bake sale flyers, a notice about a missing cat, and a new flyer taped crookedly in bright orange, turkey giveaway, November 23rd, all welcome. Shirley stood near the table of casseroles, her voice clear and firm, rising above the soft wheeze of the old heater in the corner. Loretta says the HOA can't sanction public holiday events on common land this year. Well then, we won't use their land. A few murmurs swirled among the crowd, faces leaning in with interest. Pastor Leonard, tall and warm-eyed in his cardigan, gave a quiet nod from his seat by the upright piano. They didn't even host one last year, Janice said softly, glancing at her stack of papers. And now they're cutting it completely? Suspicious timing. Franklin, seated beside Shirley with a mug of weak coffee in his hand, stayed quiet. The air was thick with resolve, he didn't need to lead this. The town was moving on its own. Shirley picked up a folded memo from the corner of the table. For those of you who didn't see it, she said, holding it aloft, this is what Loretta sent through Kyle. Due to pending infrastructure work and budget adjustments, all large-scale seasonal gatherings are suspended until further notice. Janice scoffed. She means, until no one pushes back. From a corner table near the stairs, someone whispered, what happened to the drainage fund from 2021? That was the signal Shirley had been waiting for. She turned to Janice, who carefully unfolded a faded manila folder and slid out photocopies of old HOA checks. I was treasurer before Kyle changed the software system, Janice said. These are the last bank copies I printed. Here, look. She passed around pages showing a $12,000 line item marked drainage resurfacing, but no corresponding permit or contractor invoice. Several heads leaned in closer. And here, she continued, pointing to another sheet, is a check for landscaping from the same month, endorsed by someone who isn't even listed on our current vendor list. The room quieted. The smell of baked beans and cinnamon lingered in the warm air, but no one returned to their plates. Franklin shifted in his seat. If this is what it looks like. It is, Shirley said. Pastor Leonard stood, brushing off imaginary dust from his sleeves. The church lawn is open to everyone, he said gently. It's not HOA property. If you want to host a community Thanksgiving, you have my blessing. A round of light applause followed, warm and spontaneous. Franklin looked around, Janice already writing a new flyer, Shirley gathering names, someone in the back suggesting they bring back the pumpkin pie contest. It felt good. Not loud or angry. Just solid. Near the kitchen door, a photo board leaned against the wall from a past rummage sale. Franklin spotted it and smiled. There, in a faded snapshot from 1985, stood his late wife, holding a tray of brownies beside a much younger Shirley in oversized sunglasses. He pointed, nudging Shirley. Well, we've aged better than those sunglasses, she said, nudging him back. I won't argue. Later, after the tables had been cleared and someone upstairs started rehearsing gentle organ chords for Sunday's hymns, Franklin stepped out into the brisk night air. The town felt more alive than it had in years. His breath made small clouds as he crossed the gravel parking lot to his truck. On the driver's side window, a white envelope flapped in the breeze, tucked beneath the wiper. Franklin's brow furrowed. He plucked it free. Typed in bold at the top. Notice of encroachment, remove personal items from HOA land. On Thanksgiving morning, two events unfold: Loretta's fence crew arrives, and so do Franklin's guests. The dawn was sharp with frost, glinting off the grass like silver threads. Along Ward Road, the quiet hum of a diesel engine shattered the stillness. A white truck with Shaw Property Services on the side backed into place, and four men in neon vests began unloading metal posts and rolls of chain-link fencing. Kyle stood beside them, clipboard in hand, barking instructions like a man trying to control a tide. Franklin watched from his porch, arms folded across his chest, scarf tied around his neck. Behind him, the aroma of roasted turkey and sweet cornbread stuffing drifted out the screen door. Across his lawn, chalk lines marked the invisible boundary he'd measured days before, the one the fence had no legal right to cross. At 9 a.m. sharp, Carla's old station wagon pulled up. Steam hissed as she popped the trunk, revealing 3-gallon-sized jugs of cider and 2 enormous trays of pecan pie. "You can fence a road," she declared, "but not a heart." Shirley followed close behind, balancing a crockpot of green bean casserole in one hand and a foldable table in the other. "Let's give them something worth filming," she murmured. Children spilled from back seats, bundled in mittens and puffy jackets, scattering toward the chalk-lined lawn. A little girl, no older than 7, crouched beside the mailbox and began painting a sign in careful red strokes: "Ward Road Potluck 2023. Her brush left faint smudges on her cheeks. One by one, the townspeople arrived. Janice laid out cornbread muffins beside a tin of cranberry relish. Hank brought a bucket of fried chicken, while Ms. Bishop offered deviled eggs and an old camp lantern in case the sun didn't hold. As tables formed a zigzag line along Franklin's lawn, laughter and the clink of serving spoons rose in defiance of the metal hammering echoing behind them. The fence crew worked quickly but without spirit, aware of the gathering audience. Kyle marched forward, phone in hand. "This is unauthorized use of HOA space," he snapped, stepping between two tables. "You're all trespassing." A few heads turned, but no one moved. "You need to dismantle this now," he continued, "or there will be fines. Cameras or not." "Smile for the internet," Shirley said, holding up her phone. Around her, others followed suit. At least 6 phones recorded Kyle's tirade from different angles. Carla poured hot cider into mismatched mugs and handed one to Franklin. "You better say something before I do." Franklin stepped onto a folding chair, his thermos raised high. The chatter faded. "To the people who built this town," he said, voice clear and warm, and never gave it up. Applause rippled through the tables. Kyle glared, but took a step back. By noon, the tables were full and so were the plates. Children played tag near the fence line, careful to stay within the chalk boundaries. The new fence shimmered behind them, absurd and out of place, a cold cage next to hot pie and laughter. As the sun dipped low, neighbors packed up dishes and folded chairs, but lingered in little clusters, reluctant to leave the warmth they'd created. Franklin stood on his porch again, watching the last family drive away. He didn't notice the car pulling in until the headlights touched his boots. Shirley stepped out, still wrapped in her wool coat, holding her phone. "You'll want to see this video," she said, eyes gleaming. "Kyle made a mistake." "Is that Kyle swearing in uniform and kicking the food table?" Janice gasps as the town watches the video projected on the church wall. The projector whirred softly, its beam catching the drifting dust that hovered like smoke in the church meeting hall. Folding chairs creaked under shifting weight, and the tap of rain on the stained glass windows offered the only ambient sound as the video played out on the beige wall above the piano. On screen, Kyle's voice crackled, rising into shouts. The image shook as Shirley adjusted her phone, but the scene was unmistakable: Kyle, pacing like a restless animal, face twisted in frustration, pointing at guests with jabbing fingers. Then came the moment everyone had heard about but hadn't yet seen: Kyle's foot crashing into the corner of the folding table, jostling pans of stuffing and flipping a plate of pecan pie into the air. A child screamed off-screen, startled. The video froze there, Kyle mid-kick, mouth open in mid-curse. Gasps rippled through the room. Janice, seated near the front, covered her mouth, eyes wide. He's in an HOA vest. That's a uniform. This wasn't just rude, it was threatening. Franklin stood quietly near the back, arms folded, gaze fixed on the frozen image. Shirley stepped forward, remote still in hand, and said evenly, "There were 6 different phones recording. This one was mine, but we've got other angles. And timestamps." Deputy Hall cleared his throat. He'd stayed in uniform out of habit, but now he tugged off his hat and held it respectfully against his chest. "This isn't the first complaint I've heard about aggressive conduct. But this isn't neighborly. It isn't even lawful." From the corner, Ms. Bishop shook her head slowly. Carla sat next to her, her coffee cup gripped tight in both hands, steam forgotten. A quiet wave of murmurs began, soft dismay, anger simmering low. Janice stood up and turned to face the room. "There's a county oversight board for HOA misconduct. I say we send this video, and every record we've got." A few nods. Then more. Pastor Leonard, standing by the bulletin board layered in decades of bake sale ads and potluck flyers, added, "We have the church printer. Who's with me to start a petition?" Franklin stepped forward at last. "If they want to claim this road, fence us out, and erase our history, they'd better be prepared for everyone in New Canaan to push back. Tonight, we take the first step." A clipboard passed hand to hand. Names appeared in long, looping cursive, shaky at times, proud always. Even Hank, who'd avoided town politics for 20 years, signed. By the time the room's clock struck 8:45, over 50 signatures had been gathered. Deputy Hall reviewed the list with quiet diligence. "The law might move slow," he said, eyes flicking up to the silent crowd, "but it still moves." Then the door creaked. Everyone turned. Framed by the dripping eaves and flickering porch light stood Loretta Shaw. Her coat glistened with rain, and her expression held no hint of retreat. "You're all making a serious mistake," she said. Winter's first snow dusts the top of Ward Road as the county truck rolls in to remove the HOA access-only signs. The engine's low hum broke the morning silence as the Orange County vehicle edged forward, snow chains clinking softly against the pavement. Steam rose from the tailpipe in bursts, mingling with the breath of early risers watching from porches wrapped in garland. 2 men in reflective vests stepped out, one carrying a wrench, the other a crowbar. They worked with quiet efficiency, pulling bolts loose from the rusting HOA access-only signs that had stood for months like sentinels of exclusion. From his window, Franklin watched. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just stood behind the frosted glass with hands in the pockets of his old flannel coat. The sight was enough. He didn't need ceremony. Later that morning, as wreaths danced on front doors and wind tugged gently at the corners of red bows, Franklin parked his truck just past the old oak stump, his father's marker. He lifted a newly carved wooden sign from the truck bed, its letters etched deep and clean, Ward Road, since 1974. He drove in the last nail himself. Then stepped back, arms crossed, snow settling on his shoulders. The town had changed, but this remained. Shirley arrived carrying 2 tin boxes of sugar cookies, each wrapped in wax paper. "Carla said you'd be here. She's got something for you at the diner." Franklin nodded. "I'll come by after." The community buzzed that day, not with gossip or complaint, but with a quiet energy that wrapped itself around light poles and window panes. Homes shimmered with colored bulbs, icicles dangling beside plastic reindeer. The diner smelled like cinnamon and pine oil, and somewhere a tape deck hummed out, "Oh Holy Night," in wavering tones. At noon, Carla stood behind the counter with a frame clutched to her chest. "We laminated it," she said with a grin. "I figured this map's earned its place." Inside the frame was the copy Franklin had made at the archive weeks ago. The faint title still legible, Ward Road, dedicated 1974. Below it, a brass plate inscribed, "In honor of Matthew Ward, who paved paths in more ways than one." She hung it beside a sepia-toned photo of the town's first railroad crossing. Folks clapped softly. A few wiped tears. When evening settled and frost etched the church windows, families gathered near the square. A tall pine stood wrapped in lights and tinsel, topped with a crooked but earnest star. Children in mismatched mittens clutched mugs of cocoa as Pastor Leonard led the countdown. The tree came alive in color, and Franklin stepped forward. He didn't use a mic. He didn't need to. This road led me home again. That was all. Applause rose like smoke from a chimney, gentle, warm, fading into song. Later, the square emptied slowly. Boot prints crunched over salted pavement. Wind carried the smell of baked ham and firewood. Franklin walked alone for a stretch, his breath a ghost in the cold. His footsteps echoed off storefront glass. Then, at the bend where the road dipped behind the chapel, he glanced back. Shirley stood there, bundled in her coat, holding 2 steaming cups of cider. The first snow didn't just blanket Ward Road, it softened old grudges and traced a new beginning. What began as one man defending a forgotten deed became a chorus of voices reclaiming dignity from quiet overreach. When rules are used for good, communities thrive. When they're misused, they crumble. Perhaps it's never too late to join hands with neighbors, to speak up for what's right. Like a lantern left glowing on a porch, truth has a way of lighting the way home.